Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mandala Effect. I am once again honoured to have an amazing guest with me today. Today, I have Ben Harris, also known as the Fear Guy. I've been following Ben for a couple of years on Instagram, and because believe it or not, I have had fear around my business and my life, and just it's so intriguing to meet somebody who calls themselves the Fear Alchemist. And you have a podcast called the Fear Alchemist as well, don't you? And
Yes.
he helps, believe it or not, Ben helps people master their fear. So, Ben, welcome.
Hey, Rosanna, thank you so much for having me. And I love that intro when you said, believe it or not, you have fear. And it's like every single human on planet Earth does because we're supposed to. If
Yeah.
you don't, then one, you're probably not listening to this podcast. Two, you're a psychopath because that's something chemically is wrong. But, it's like it's a natural chemical biological response. So it's completely normal. And yeah, even for myself, it's always a practice to lean more and more into it. But I always tell people it's not about, fighting your fear or becoming fearless. Cause then you have the expectation of like, well, I have to, live without my fear. It's like, no, the reframe is how can I live with it? How can I walk with it? How can I befriend it? And then that's when the actual like alchemizing happens. That's when you quote unquote overcome it because you've accepted it and you're not trying to get rid of it, and then you actually become less afraid or seemingly fearless, and you can do the thing you want to do.
Seemingly fearless. Okay, I love this, and we're going to dig into this for the next however many minutes. But who are you in your own words? Who is Ben
Mhm.
Harris?
That's
What's
funny.
your
What a great
mission?
question. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's many facets to who I am, many identities, many um, masks I wear too. But as far as like the fear guy, yeah, it's who I am. I'm on a mission to help people free themselves from fear, plain
Mhm.
and simple. Like what I just said of instead of fighting, resisting, and avoiding fear and think it's wrong or that you're weak for feeling it, like truly like friending it and even begin to thank it. Like, can you thank your fear for trying to protect you? Can you thank it for actually showing you something you deeply care about, that you deeply desire? So, and if you follow that as a compass, then it actually shows you like what you want. It shows you your next level of expansion. It shows you where you're supposed to go on your mission, like your
Mm,
path and purpose on this earth. Because usually the thing that you want more than anything is also what you're terrified of the most.
yeah.
So it's a great way to find the thing that you're meant to do. And so, but as you know, like you mentioned at the beginning, we come up against that because our fear is there to tell us everything that's going to go wrong, how we'll get hurt, how we'll fail, how we'll get rejected, all the things. And so, and it sounds really smart. It sounds very convincing, like we're going to die. And that's why we don't do the thing that we want to do. So my job is to simply help you walk with that feeling so you can do the thing that you're meant to be doing.
And I mean, fear, so many people are unconscious of their fear. We're
Oh
not
yeah.
necessarily aware of it. How does one become aware of the fear that is holding them back?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, believe it or not, I've spent a long time trying to wake people up to it, but I
Yeah.
realize that's not my job.
Yeah.
It's not my job to tell
With you
them.
there.
Right.
They'll find it in their own time.
Exactly, right, and it's very frustrating because it's like, "I have the answer for you, to help you, to free you," but you're not listening, and it's like, "Well, yeah, it's not my job to make them listen." Like, that's I can present the information and the tools and the wisdom, and it's their job to do it when they're ready. Um, but like one of the first exercises I have all my clients do, whether it's one on one or in the group, is we just simply begin to notice and track and become aware of our fear. And all that really is like, when am I not present? When am I resistant? When am I worried? When am I stressed? When am I filled with self doubt or overthinking? Or when am I procrastinating? It's very simple. Like if you're not doing the thing you want to do, if you're feeling resistance, it's because there's a fear that's in the way.
Mhm.
So it's, yeah, it's just like Because you think about, okay, well, today I want to post my story on Instagram, but why am I not doing it? Why is it feeling so resistant and so sticky and so stuck and frustrating? Blah. It's like, well, subconsciously, I'm resisting doing it. My subconscious is telling me without me consciously being aware that something bad might happen, that maybe I'll get criticized, maybe I'll get judged, maybe someone will leave a negative comment, or, maybe I'll get one like and I'll feel terrible about myself. So there's just all these things that you don't know what's happening. And like what you mentioned is like so many of us are unaware of it is because it's our normal. And that's this complete, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a conflict. I mean, it is a conflict. It's a paradox. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So a paradox of like, I'm not aware of it because it's such my normal that I'm actually afraid of becoming aware because that will threaten my default homeostasis feeling of safety.
Hmm.
So it's this paradox of like, you actually don't want to know because again, like you asked about my identities. So if I have an identity of, the fear guy, and then someone comments on Instagram, dude, what are you talking about? This isn't what it is. You're wrong. And then if I'm not grounded in myself, I feel like, oh, are they right? Do I not know what I'm talking about? Am I an imposter? Should I not be teaching and helping people? So all that stuff comes up. And anytime you feel that, again, that just resistance or that hesitance, that's how you know fear is showing up.
Yeah. And you mentioned some, because I guess in the space that we're in and the space that so many of your audience are in, um, and the audience of this podcast, you were in the online space, and one of those big fears is somebody leaving a negative comment, somebody calling us out, and it's this imposter syndrome, isn't it? Of what are you? You don't know what you're talking about. My friend had one the other day. I mean, she is an extremely talented voice coach, and we're both trained in Jungian psychology. So we sort of, so a lot of what we say doesn't resonate with people. And we're going to get people, and same with you, we're calling out people's fear, we're calling out what people don't know about themselves, and so there's going to be resistance to that, and we are going to get these comments, but those comments in a way are a gift. Would you agree?
Yeah, I love that you said that at the end because that's where I was going to go with it. That's how you know you're doing something right. So when I talk about the paradox, it's also, the paradox is also polarity. And it's like how you create attraction, how you have people that love it is also you're
Mhm.
going to have people who it triggers and they don't like it or whatever. If you're always just like in the middle and just so neutral, one, you're not being your full authentic self. Let's just be honest.
Mhm.
And you're trying to please everybody and you're not going to make money. You're not going to impact people. You're not going to build a business or have clients because no one's attracted to that. They don't know. It's not coming across clearly like your passion, your love, your gift. And so, like, when you do get a comment like that, there's probably, 10 times the amount of people who are loving it. They might just not say anything.
Mhm.
That's what I've really learned too is like there's so many people watching. Like you just said, 2 years. I have no idea that you were on for 2 years. So it's like you have no
Sneaking
idea
around in the background.
right? Just creeping and lurking in the background. And it's like, but that's how you know it's just stuff like that is like people are always, watching and observing and appreciating you, even if they don't say anything.
Yeah.
And it's why everything's so negative. I just look at the news, for example,
Oof.
is because we value like that more than positivity. I think they've done research. I think it's like 7 or 8 times more or something like that.
Mm.
Just because again, that like threatens our survival, right? Because the
Mhm.
negative response comes into our brain and says it pings our, amygdala, it cues the stress hormones, it gets us worrying, and it hits like, oh, like the fear response, something's wrong, triggered, and that's much more motivating, and it's supposed to be in order to keep us alive. And so that's why everything's typically more motivating because that's how people respond, and
Yeah.
we've used it for a long time to, whether you want to believe it or not, control people or even unconsciously control people, just because it's like this is how we get people attention
Mhm.
by using fear and by using stress and by using negativity. So just because that's what technically it is in the hierarchy of needs, survival is
Mhm.
first. And
Yeah.
so it's like we're going to prioritize that, like avoiding pain, then we're going to prioritize avoiding pain more than receiving pleasure, because
Mhm.
that is, again, threatens our survival. Or whether that's physically, that also goes into like our identities, and the rejection and the failure too.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much in this. You have sort of shifted your message at the minute to help people overcome this fear of selling. Um, and this, when we look at selling, there is a lot of fear-based selling because of this, because I guess I think of the beauty industry, for instance, where
Mm.
they use our fear to, or our kind of fear that we're not good enough to sell us anti-wrinkle cream or sell us the latest designer handbag because we're not going to look like our peers. How do you think that we can? Fear-based selling doesn't sit well with me. I can't do it. It doesn't seem to me filled with integrity. I love this smile. What is your opinion on fear-based selling?
Yeah. So that was an experiment actually, like, because why I started talking about selling so much is because I was doing my regular like Fear Alchemy group coaching
Yeah.
program for like coaches and healers. And during that process, I noticed selling came up a lot. And so I was like,
Mm,
okay, let me just do a
okay.
program about this and just see how it goes. And long story short, I'm definitely not going to do it again.
Okay.
I'm not this sales guy. And so like I love it being a part of the conversation, but I don't, for me personally, I don't love having that be the focal point of
Yeah.
it. But it was very helpful for me. Like a really cool thing about this work is that you get to indirectly and also directly learn so much about yourself when you decide to show up and teach something.
Mhm.
Because I got to face all of who knows about all, but a lot of my stories and my fears about, selling and showing up in that way. And so excuse me, I'm grateful that I did it. And we actually just got done yesterday. Yesterday we had our
Oh,
last
well
call
done.
for that program. And long story short, it was super cool to watch how those people like transform, because it's so much more than just selling. Like when they show up, I'm not just saying, here's a sales strategy, follow this, plug it in, because it's actually like, what is in the way of you showing up authentically?
Mhm.
That's really what it is, because like that's the best sales strategy. Of course, there's like tips and tactics and strategies, but none of that will work for you if you're forcing it or trying to be something you're not.
Mhm.
So it's like this morning, part of what I was working on this morning is actually like a framework that I'm going to give some of my peeps about how to like sell on stories. And but it's not coming from the place of like you're not good enough, and this is a nuanced thing, because these strategies work for a reason, right? And so it's not to discount them completely. And someone that I was working with, was just like, I hate being sold, like I hate them trying to get something out of me. Well, I'm like, well, there's your problem. Like you're not going to make sales or get clients or
Mm.
whatever, or even really help people if you believe that it's an icky manipulative relationship, and this person has a past with different levels of abuse. So of course that
Mhm.
stuff is going to come up. But this is so nuanced, because for me, I used to do this and I see so many other people do it, where it's like all or nothing, where it's like I need to push, I need to like mix. I used to do this on sales calls. Like I need to make them know how bad and how terrible and miserable their life is, and I'm the only one who can save them.
Mm.
Right? That creates a savior complex. That's fear. Da da da. But then the other one was where I kind of swung to the other side of the polarity, which is like, well, I'm just going to let people come to me. I'm just going to say inspirational things. And if they want, they'll ask, which is true. Like there are a lot of people who just come. But
Mhm.
at the same time, what is that middle ground for me and for everyone listening, right? Like that dance with it, because you're gonna probably have to go back and forth until you come into your middle. And it's you can come from a soulful, loving place while
Mm.
selling and also still using certain strategies. Because like it works for a reason, right? Is like there's nothing wrong with, for example, like pointing out why someone is stuck, right? Because like if you like when we look at like the beauty industry, of course it's like you're not pretty enough as you are. Buy
Mhm.
our makeup so you fix that.
Yeah,
Like
fix your face.
fix your face. Right. And but it's like so it can come from like a loving place of okay, how can I help people realize that they have a problem, that they're stuck in it? Because that's honestly part of leading. That's part of coaching, that you have to go into those uncomfortable places. And I don't view it as like closing the sale. I view it as leading the person to like the best solution for them. So it's not like coming from an ego place of I need the sale or I'm afraid of them saying no or what will it mean about me. It's taken a lot of practice, but it comes from a place of what is the best solution for them. And a
Mm.
lot of the time that takes diving into uncomfortable things like, well, why don't you want to invest? Why don't you want to do the money? Why don't, you know, why do you want to not solve this problem? And that's a question that not a lot of people like to know, or they've never been asked. And that's usually, the fear within them. So for me, again, like it's this paradox of like not using fear to manipulate, but using fear to awaken and to bring people back to their truth and to see how they're limiting themselves. And, but then again, allowing them to choose. It's
Mhm.
not like you only have 20 seconds to say yes. And if you don't say yes, then this offer's gone forever and your life is going to suck. It's like, no, like my job is to, help you realize like what's in the way and
Yeah.
then present the solution and allow you to choose for yourself because ultimately it's a commitment to yourself anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I really love that you use the fear to awaken, uh,
Mhm.
kind of, and that's that bringing that unconscious to the conscious, and that is the first step in being able to overcome it, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you probably said this on your podcast, right? About the Jungian quote about
It's
you
all over
haven't said
my
it?
website.
It's on your website?
Everywhere.
Okay, there you go, right? So like, do you want to say it? Because I know we both know everything.
No, I'll let you say it. Go on.
Yeah, I might butcher it then. Okay. So what is it? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that
I look
exactly
so
it?
proud of myself and I
Uh,
didn't do anything.
okay, beautiful.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean that's the same exact thing, right? And it's honestly creepy
Mhm.
how like I've seen that play out in my own life. Like we recently moved homes and I saw how like subconsciously like we created this
Mm.
and like in a good way. And that
Mhm.
also happens in the reverse. And I was just like, oh my God, like this really is like it's creepy but really cool. And it seems like magic, right? Is like there's this other oh shoot, do you know have you read the Hermetic principles or whatever?
No, I haven't. I listened to a podcast, oh my goodness, it blew my mind, with
Okay,
Robert Grant,
cool.
a few weeks ago, and he spoke about them in that.
Cool. So like it's yeah, Hermeticism is really cool and really simple. And I'm gonna probably butcher this, but there's one of the principles that says like, oh, I might have to Google it, but essentially it just says like, everything in the universe is a law.
Yeah.
And and it seems like chance just because you don't know the law.
Mhm.
And it's very similar to one of my favorite sayings is like, magic is the name for science we don't understand yet.
Yeah.
So it's like we call it fate, we call it magic, we call it whatever else you want. And it's like, yes, that is that. Like that's what's so cool. Like magic is the unknown, which is what we simultaneously fear, but
Mhm.
it's also what calls us to adventure. And so that again, all right, it's that paradox of this
Mhm.
beautiful human life that we have of like, I'm terrified, but I'm so excited to go.
Yeah.
And that's that, like, if we didn't have the unknown, if we didn't have things to explore and to try and figure out and try to understand and explain, like there would be no room for innovation or just play or exploration. So it's, yeah, it's an important part to just like understand that like there is science and law and like mathematics and physics
Mhm.
behind everything. Um, but at the same time, it's like it is magical, like it is a
Yeah.
spiritual feeling. Because like the more like I've tapped into it and like more and more I come into alignment, from my perspective, like I come closer to that oneness, right? And it is like an equation. It's like,
Mhm.
like I'm figuring this out, like, and it's just, I don't know, it just, yeah, like it just comes more and more into alignment, like more gears are locking in. And it feels divine because I am getting closer to my divinity and
Yeah.
to the all, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. I love that, and I'm love that this is where the conversation's going, because it is like especially when you dig into your own unconscious mind, you will be given challenges, you'll be given things to overcome, fear mainly. Befriend your ego, befriend the fear, and work with it to be able to create, design the life that you love. And you said that you've kind of subconsciously created this house that you've just moved into, and getting closer to this feeling of, or to this experience of oneness and connection. It's like puzzle pieces, as we're being given these challenges to overcome, these puzzle pieces fall into place. Sorry, I have a cat
Oh, yeah,
that
okay. Mhm.
these puzzle pieces just fall into place. And one thing can seem so terrifying at the time, and I often refer to it like I had cancer a few years ago, but I that to me was a massive puzzle piece in me coming back to wholeness. And we have to experience those, and this is why facing the fear is so important. So
Agreed.
I would like to know a little bit more about Ben and how you became the fear guy. What was your journey to getting here today? Now you speak a bit about your story in losing a load of money in an investment. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you kind of got here and how you're
Yeah.
moving towards oneness?
Yeah. I mean, it's like many people, there's a lot of moments, like you said, puzzle pieces, but
Mhm.
a few of those puzzle pieces were, is like, even as a kid, I felt like like looking back at it now, like there was definitely certain things where I was curious about the things that scared me.
Mm.
And I felt like for whatever reason, of course, it might have been programmed in me. Maybe I just came with it. But the fact of I just felt like I needed to do the thing that I was afraid of. And it wasn't until when I was 19 years old, my friend gave me this book. And at the time, I was really into hip hop music. That was my first love, my first passion, my first dream that I went after. And in the book, it essentially said, you know, the key to becoming successful is to do everything you're afraid of, to
Mm.
become fearless. And that was the first time I saw the words put to the feeling that I had, because I always kind of did and explored things that were uncomfortable. Like I was drawn to that for whatever reason. And then that put words to it. I was like, oh, got it. Like, this is actually the thing, like the knowledge put into the feeling. And so then I just started doing everything that I was afraid of, from the little things to the big things. And, throughout the years, throughout the next decade, I finally figured out, I was like, oh, like this is the thing that I'm really good at that a lot of other people are not. And yes, there's some natural inclinations that I have. Like if you look at like how I'm designed astrologically and like in human design, there's certain attributes I have that make it easier for me to feel and to see and to navigate fear. But at the same time, it's just like an athlete, like the gift isn't enough. Like you have to practice and you have to cultivate it. And so after a decade of doing everything that I could find, like if I ever felt hesitant or nervous or like scared, I knew I had to do that thing. And so eventually it came to the point of, and it was actually at the beginning of the pandemic, ironically, right when, everyone was afraid, is when I realized, and to give people context, what even led up to this point, in 2019, I quit my job and I didn't have, like, it really was so delusional. Like, I didn't know I wanted to be a coach at that point. I didn't know that, like, I had this gift. All I knew was I had this calling to embrace this feeling and jump into the unknown. And I didn't have a business plan of how to make money or anything like that. And so I just continued I took the leap. And then all of a sudden I found myself, like you mentioned the money, like shortly after I quit my job, I realized that this big investment that I made, like the reason why I was able to quit my job is because I had this crypto investment that
Mm,
was, paying me around 5,000 or so or more a month. And so I'm like, cool, like that can like support me until I, figure this thing out. A few months after I quit my job, it was gone. And
mm,
it was a scam. So I did make some money, thankfully, that I saved. But at the same time, I was out 40 grand. And so I was like, okay, like this is scary. And so because I no longer have a job, I no longer have a source of income, and this business idea is still so green, and like I'm not making much money yet, so I don't know what to do. And I remember having this feeling that, again, just a delusional feeling that everything's going to be okay. And even though logically you would look at it and say, like, Ben, you need to go get a job, like,
mm,
go do the smart thing. But I was like, I'm just going to keep one step in front of the other. And then right when the pandemic happened, I was in a meditation and I got the download for the fear guy. Like, it just came in. And then, like, I was staying with family at the time, and they, reaffirmed to me that, yeah, Ben, like, you are a great coach. And like, that's what you've even been doing in the corporate world for years. Like, I didn't even know that. Like, when I look back at it, my favorite thing in the corporate world was coaching people. Like,
mm.
loved following, like, I loved helping people reach their goals. Like, it wasn't like I wasn't interested in really anything else but the people. And so it allowed me to focus, like looking back at that, I'm like, oh, that is what's natural and that is what I love. And so, and then I put that together with, oh, this natural inclination and also practice that I have toward fear is a match. And I have this, divine feeling to rebrand everything. And so within a week or two, I rebranded everything to the fear guy. And of course, there's been challenges since that point, but that's when everything like really like locked in and clicked.
Mhm.
Like, I signed 4 clients in a week. So I was like, okay, well, that must be something. I mean, and that's a whole other story about, you know, because for me, like, I wasn't formally trained of like, here's how you walk people through fear. It was like
Yeah.
I've had years of experience and like I was trained in the corporate world, but this was a different setting. But I, again, just had this feeling of like, I think I just need to get on a call and work with somebody, and I feel like I'm going to know what to do. And that's exactly what happened. And like, just by getting on the calls, like, I worked out like my program, like with my first 4 clients, I just figured out, oh, this is how it works. And
Yeah.
those 4 people like completely transformed. I'm like, sweet. And then I just kept doing it with every single person, and I saw those results. And so that's short story long, or a long story short, whatever one you prefer, of like how I found that calling and how it came to be.
I love it. And I love how you say that it was like you kind of, it just happened. You knew that it was the right thing. You were so aligned with your intuition to just follow the calling. And this is where most people don't trust the intuition. And there's a fear around taking that step into whatever it is that they then want to go and do. So how, I guess, how did you have fear around becoming the fear guy?
For sure. Yeah, like I mentioned, right? Like, At first, I think it was just like I was consumed by this feeling. It was just like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. And so I did it and then it worked out. But I'll say there's probably more subsequent fears of like, was that a fluke? Can like I keep this up? Am I experienced enough? Do I know what I'm doing? So like at the beginning, it was just kind of like a survival, like intuitive hit of like, yeah, there's nothing else to do but this, so I got to do it. And then after that, it was like, oh, like all those doubts and fears came into play.
And so, how did you overcome them?
A mix of leaning into them, a mix of hiring people, a mix of like hiring other coaches and mentors, a mix of journaling, a mix of reading, a mix of plant medicine, a mix of like still not have figured stuff out. So it's like, it's a mixed bag of I'm a human trying to, doing my best just like everyone else. And honestly, I actually do use this sounds kind of cheesy, but I do use when I say my method, it's like it's not like the only thing that exists, but from what I've found, there's nothing like it's similar to some things, but not exactly like it. Like I use it in the sense of like, my prompts or feelings and it's just funny to be in the place of like, oh, like this is why it works, because sometimes, right, I forget even for myself, even though day to day, week to week, I'm helping certain people do it for themselves, that I forget it can also work on me. And so I just shine the light back on myself and, listen to that fear and explore it instead of just saying like, oh, I've done this already. Like I know, da 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 da. Like actually taking space to feel it and to go into it.
So, how can somebody feel that fear when they're in the midst of it? Because that's often the bit that gets us stuck.
Yeah. And it's, again, this is like such a paradox of like, it is going to be uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that it has to be like terrifying, like miserable, or like you have to super suffer through it.
Mhm.
Um, but the most simple thing I can always get people, what I like is just like the breath, right? Is like, even like I've been meditating the past few days, and what I've noticed is like a lot of constriction coming up like in my chest. And like what I've been telling myself is literally just like, just keep breathing, like follow that expansion. So it's not about like not feeling the fear. It's not about resisting it, because the more you resist it, it's only going to create more fear inside of your body. So it's like like as uncomfortable as this is, and I need to keep moving through it. And the example I always really like is like, a mother giving birth is there's like for hours she's contracting,
Mhm.
and it's anyway, I'm not an expert, but I
And
haven't
it's
done it
not
myself.
painful at all, and, she just has to breathe through it.
You just have to breathe, right? But conceptually,
Yeah.
right, is like, do you have contractions, right? And it's like you have to breathe through it, and then there's a break, but that keeps going, and they get longer, and there's a not as long of a break, and so of course it's going to be intense, and it tends to get more painful, and then all of a sudden you get through it, and there's this beautiful being that and something is birthed. And I like to use this metaphor as like through anything, whether that's on the micro or the macro of like, wow, I need to breathe through this workout, I need to breathe through this meditation, I need to, because that's how life is. That's another hermetic principle, right, of like the rhythm of life. Like when you look at a wave, which we
Mm.
are all energy, which we're all even matter, right? When you look at like water, you look at a solid,
Mhm.
ice, you look at water vapor, it's
Yeah.
just a different wave, right? And it's like tighter or it's more open and flowy. And it's like that is just the natural way of life, that there are waves. And like if it's going to go up, it's going to come down. And if it's come down, it's going to go up. So it's like no matter where I am, like I just need to keep breathing and riding that wave. And so it's not like, of course, there are certain like tips and certain things like, okay, we'll try this prompt or try this, go ahead and journal this, do this mindset hack, whatever, and that we could do. But on a very just like basic level, it's helpful just to know that like this is actually what you're supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
It's like this is what's supposed to be happening. When you feel fear, there's going to be a contraction. And if you can breathe through it, there's naturally going to be an expansion on the other side. And if you can know that that's coming, it'll make it somewhat more enjoyable for you.
Hmm.
You can be more present for it. And one mantra I tend to like is like, thank you, like, I'm grateful for this, or thank you for this challenge. Like, I'm curious to even know for you, like when you had cancer, is like, it's very hard to be something to be grateful for that.
Hmm.
But if you can tap into that moment of like, I'm grateful for whatever reason, like, I'm grateful for what I'm learning through it or who I'm becoming through it, then because it's like, yes, life is beautiful, and it's all like I'm looking outside like at the trees and like the hills and stuff, and it's just like it's man, it's just really this beautiful, like interesting paradox of like that tree's gonna die, but then it goes back into the earth and recycles to like, and it gives life. And
Hmm.
there's this book that I like. Have you ever heard of Only Fear Dies?
No, I haven't.
So it's a short book, easy to read, and it's essentially the concept is that there is only life and that
Yeah.
there is only love, which is, I believe, the truth too. And of
Hmm.
course, we go back to the polarity, like love is on one end, fear is on the other, because fear is protecting life and like you close and you close your heart, all the stuff. But it's like really at the end of it, like what is fear preventing is okay, the loss of love, or oftentimes the receiving of love.
Hmm.
And like again, back to the tree, right? Is like, well, just because it dies, did it really die? Right? Because again, it's giving life to the trees around it and to the ecosystem. So it's like really like the only thing that dies is fear. And so if you can keep breathing and keep trusting and keep the faith and keep moving forward, then you'll realize like, wow, like I'm I'm fine. I'm alive. And if you're not alive anymore, then it's not even a problem because it's
Yeah.
like, right? Because it's just like, oh, cool. Like, I'm whatever you want to call it. Again,
Yeah.
just like the tree, back into the
Yeah.
universal ecosystem. So really fear is the only thing that dies.
I really love that. And it I love to take people to the bigger picture like this. And we have our small self fears. We have the fears within us that are going to hold us back. But ultimately, the bigger picture of, but what if you did breathe into that fear and overcome it? And you then create a ripple effect of love, of positivity as you overcome that fear and inspire somebody else to do the same. And you expand, and then the people around you are encouraged to expand. And it it encourages growth when one person can overcome their fear. And it is all just, we are just all part of the same wave. We're all just, and then depending on how deep you want to go into the spiritual and um, how consciousness is expanding, like fear is the thing that we're effectively trying to shake. It is what we're dropping off because we're moving into like we're activating the heart chakra of the planet, and we are and love is the truth. So this is why I think the work that you do is great, because and you you know, when you speak on Instagram and stuff, you kind of don't necessarily go into the deep spiritual principles of it, but the underlying truth that love love is going to get you through is there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, yeah, that's all I got. I'll just put stamp of approval.
Stamp
Yeah.
of approval. Great. Fantastic. Okay, moving on.
You are, I approve. Just in case you were seeking that outside of yourself.
um, so coming back to fear and people in business and the people that you work with, do you think that people are more afraid of failure or success?
Do you know what my answer to this?
Yeah, well, I know what my answer to it is.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, it's both. So, like, how I look at it is most people don't realize most people tend to resonate with the fear of failure because that's just the most natural one.
Mhm,
Because it's like, oh, of course, I don't want to fail, right? It's like, I don't want this business that I'm starting to not work. Like, of course, that sucks. So that's one side of it. Like we've talked a lot about polarity in this conversation. So that's one polarity. Then the other end of it is like to be successful, to actually have the thing that you want work out. And there's a lot of reasons why I actually don't want that to happen, right? Is there's more responsibility with it, there's more pressure. You might have a negative story with more money, more power. Maybe it's egotistical, maybe it's prideful, maybe the spotlight and the attention on you makes you uncomfortable. Like there's so many different reasons and unwanted outcomes that actually come with success that people don't realize. And so what I found with my clients and people that I, support are they kind of get stuck in the middle. They get like
mm,
sandwiched of, well, I don't want to fail because that sucks. And if I fail, that means I'm a failure, or that means I don't matter. That means I'm not good enough. I'm worthless, etc. So I'll do just enough to not fail, but I'm also afraid of succeeding because this story of that I have of that I am a failure or that I don't matter or that I'm not enough, once I do succeed, that actually proves that story that I have, my identity, as untrue.
mhm,
So little do people know is like you actually don't want to be successful for different reasons. Like on the surface, more responsibility. You go deeper, it's like you have an identity that you don't deserve it or that you're unworthy of it. And so if you do get it right, that is threatening who you are.
mm,
So fear comes in to protect you, to keep you safe. And so they get sandwiched of the middle of, well, I don't want to fail. And unconsciously, I don't want success. And so they just stay like in this middle ground and then they feel frustrated. They feel stuck. They just feel like, what does it matter with me? Like that I can't actually get the thing that I want, like no matter how hard I try. And it's like, well, you actually have this invisible barrier that's preventing that success. And so that's one of my favorite things to do with people is to just figure out, well, what's that invisible barrier that you're
mm,
unable to see? And it's a lot of like going back to how do you work with that fear, like nervous, regulating your nervous system and expanding into that of more money, more attention, like the capacity to hold that responsibility. That's been a big thing for me personally
mm,
of just like, whoa, I didn't realize how much that I said I just wanted to be free, but
mhm,
my story of freedom was just the avoidance of responsibility.
mhm,
And so like there's that interesting tricky mix, right? Of like how the ego is like, well, you value freedom, so don't you just want to be free? And I'm like, well, yes, but it's actually been helped me be more free, by accepting those things. So it's this interesting, sometimes confusing, um, I'll say often, extremely often confusing because we have all these different desires and motivators that we're unaware of. So it's like, don't fail. And then it's like, well, I want to be successful, but I don't want to be successful. And it's like, wait, I do want to fail. So it's like you're kind of going back and forth of just like, and this is often happening just underneath the surface.
Yeah.
So it's just very frustrating for people who are experiencing it.
Yeah. I mean, I know where those people are. I've been there, and I think every time you step up to a new level in life,
Oh, yeah.
business, you're always going to face a new level. Did becoming a dad bring help you in this fear? Because being a dad is a huge responsibility.
Absolutely. That was, I mean, definitely one thing that it's kind of both. It wasn't something I was really afraid of, but it was like, I could, yeah, sense like the responsibility of it. Um, and it's like, I couldn't really know what it was like until I did it. Like,
Mm,
you could read all the books or talk to people, but you just have to kind of do it to figure it out. And it is a lot, it's just like,
mm,
whoa, I have to do all of what I wanted to do and, help take
yeah.
care of this other human life. And so one of my favorite lessons that I've learned from him, there's a lot, but I was telling someone this yesterday too, but because how we parent him, right, is like we want him to just completely be himself and feel
Mm,
safe with that, to feel celebrated. And so whenever he does certain things that I feel uncomfortable with, like I get triggered. I'm like, oh, like that's because his expression, right? Because he is free to
mm,
com- to be him. There's still something within me that feels unsafe with that part. And so it's just been a massive tool for
mm,
reparenting myself endlessly. And I know I'm just getting started. So there's going to be a lot more, which I'm excited for. But yeah, like allowing myself to really love myself more too, like just seeing how much I love him and like knowing that like just there's, you know, endless unconditional love for him for no
mm,
reason. It's like how can I show that towards myself?
yeah.
So that's been another huge lesson too, just allowing myself to like direct instead of giving that to someone else, how can I give it and receive it
Mm,
for me too? But yeah, it's definitely been like I definitely could not have experienced all of what life has to offer without becoming a parent for sure.
wow, that's beautiful. And loving ourselves is probably, again, we're so afraid to do so. I think this is a beautiful place to kind of start winding up. We have spoken a lot about alignment, and you have kind of alluded to your alignment is really helping you on your path and show up as your best self every day. How can somebody come into who maybe feels stuck, fear in their business, whatever they're doing, begin to come into alignment to show up as their true self in their
Yeah,
lives?
similar to what I just said, I would start following your fear. So, like I just mentioned with my son, right, is like that trigger or that fear or that survival nervous system reaction response, whatever you want to call it, is coming up for a reason. And I could just take it as like, oh man, like that's annoying or frustrating, but it's like, oh, like I could look deeper
Mm,
and just being like, oh, what is making me uncomfortable and why? And it's like by following that feeling, like it's leaving clues. One example I like to use is like, have you ever seen those people who use like metal detectors on the beach looking for
yep.
like treasure?
Yeah,
Right?
I used to live on the beach there every
Mhm.
Sunday morning.
See, I love it, right? It says like, so how I view it as like you're just, walking around life and then all of a sudden you get a beep, which is a trigger, and it's like, oh, and like you can't see right under what's underneath the surface. So you dig and you get to the root and you find like, oh, this is the thing that, like I couldn't know unless I was paying attention and like looking for it. And so, one of my favorite Joseph Campbell quotes is the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So it's the exact same thing. Is like
Mhm,
the thing you fear, and this is what Tim Ferriss says, like the thing you fear is most often the thing you need to do.
mm,
So using that example of, using the metal detector treasure hunting is like you hear the beep, that's the trigger, and it's like, awesome, let me dig and look at this thing. And then that gives me the treasure. of like the nugget of wisdom or the experience or the shift of perception, whatever that thing
Mhm.
may be. So it's like you just start following that feeling, and then it will like if you just do the things that you're afraid of, like I mean, that's where real freedom is, and that's where the most love is. That's
Yeah.
where probably the most success is.
Mhm.
Um, but and you,
Terrifying.
it is terrifying, and it's honestly endless because, like what you said, people tend to ask me like, "Well, fear guy, like, do you not feel fear?" I was like, "No, like I feel it every day because one, I'm human, I'm biologically wired to feel it, and two, is like I'm always going to new levels.
Mm.
So, like you mentioned, so the only way to truly avoid fear is to like stay where you're at and to
Mhm.
have no desire and
Mhm.
to have no aspiration. And even then, you're still having, you're just unconscious of it. So it's like, well, I'm going to accept it and I'm going to follow it. I'm going to use it as like fuel. I'm going to use it as inspiration and as a friend to like propel me and to expand me into more of who I am. So it's not like letting it, stop me and hold me and keep me small and safe in a box. It's like, thank you for showing me where I need to go so I
Mhm.
can truly be who I want to be. And then you just boop, follow that and it's pretty simple. And then it just shows you the thing that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, amazing. Let's follow the thing that scares you and you'll be taken to the next level.
Yeah, and of course there's nuance to that where it's like if you follow the thing you're afraid of, there's of course like for people who haven't maybe done as much work, right? Is like,
Mhm.
well, then I'm going to do the like let's say for example you were in a relationship, you grew up in a family, an abusive or emotional high stress family, then chaos is going to feel normal to you. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, if I follow that fear, technically I'm just creating what's safe and familiar. So there's a nuance, right? Of like, well, I'm not continuing doing the thing that actually feels comfortable.
Mm.
The fear is like, what is actually the love that feels scary for me? For me personally, right? It was like the love that actually feels safe. It was the love
Mhm.
that feels normal. It's the one that doesn't have like this high emotional, like fairy tale, like
Yeah.
adrenaline and ecstasy. Like there's moments of that, but it was like I just feel safe. But I told myself I shouldn't feel that because I wasn't used to that.
Mm.
That wasn't my normal. And so it took a lot of work to unwind that. But at the end of the day, like it is as simple as like following the thing that you're afraid of because that really is your truth and desire underneath it.
Yeah, I love that. And, there is an amount of awareness that you have to have in order to know that following the chaos, the ecstasy isn't the way. And one of my mentors says, if you want to break a pattern to create a new reality, you have to do the opposite of what you would of what you are drawn to, what you're normally going to do. And I see that in my own relationships. I see that in business, in life. It's
Yeah, I love that. Like just even like a question for everything, just like, well, what would I normally do in this response or in this situation? I'm actually gonna try that. That sounds like fun,
Yeah.
right? Where it's just like, because who knows, right? Like that's you can get such a different result. So it's just like, well, what is the complete opposite of what I normally do? Like, let's try that.
Yeah, oh, I love that. Fantastic. Um, this conversation's been amazing. I had another question, but it's totally just vanished. Um, Thank you so much. My heart is so open with this. I think it's
Yay.
just um, great. The work you do is great. This podcast is great, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Rosanna. And I think that's a good you got the question?
I got the question. Well, no, you say your
Okay.
bit, and then I'll
Hold on
go.
to the question. But what your response of like the opening of the heart, that's what happens with every single person I work with, right? Is like because it's just funny. Like I never get sick of hearing that. It's like, I'm so afraid of this thing happening. And then once they discuss it, once they navigate it, once they go into it, once they feel safe with it and listen to it and accept it, then it's like, oh, like I actually feel more open. I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel heard. I'm actually doing the thing that I've been not wanting to do, or I've been stopping myself from doing. So it's just, that is what happens
Mm-hmm.
every single time. And like, once you get enough practice of doing that, it's like, it's still going to be scary. Like, that's the whole point. It's supposed to be, no matter how many times you've done it, but at least now you have the practice and the awareness of like, okay, this is going to be scary, but at least I can do it this time, because I
Yeah.
know there's going to be something good on the other side.
Yeah, and that's that expansion, full circle. The question was actually, how can people work with you?
Yay. Yeah, but just go find me on Instagram if you were on there, the Fear Guy, or my podcast is the Fear Alchemist. I work one-on-one. I have groups. So my website is feeling-free.com. You can just Google Ben Harris, the Fear Guy.
Yeah.
Find me at whatever.
All the
Whatever
links will be below.
Wherever your intuition takes you, listen to that. And then it's like, what scares you the most? Go do that.
I highly recommend following Ben on Instagram, definitely, for entertainment value and to learn something.
Hey,
That's a compliment, by the way.
thank you.
So all the links to connect with Ben will be below, and I hope that you've all enjoyed this episode, so thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Mandala Effect. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform. I greatly appreciate your ongoing support, and the podcast wouldn't be where it is today without you, so thank you. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family, and let's continue spreading the Mandala effect of magic and infinite possibilities. See you next week.